blonde woman holding the hand of a small boy wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. They were surrounded by bags of supermarket shopping, and they were watching us. Even framed by all those plastic carrier bags and chaperoning a little kid, the woman was the kind that you look at more than once. What you noticed about her child was that he was carrying a long plastic tube with a dull light glowing faintly inside. If you had been to the cinema at any time over the last 20 years, you would recognize it as a lightsaber, traditional weapon of the Jedi Knights. This one needed new batteries. The beautiful woman was smiling at me and the salesman. The little kid pointed his lightsaber, as if about to strike us down. "Daddy," he mouthed from the other side of the plate glass wall. "My wife and son," I said, turning away, but not before I caught the disappointment in the salesman's eyes. "Got to go." "Daddy, that's me. Daddy." "You don't even like cars," my wife reminded me, edging our old VW estate through the traffic. "Just looking. And you're too young for a midlife crisis, Harry. You're 30. The way it works, you wait for 15 years and then run off with a secretary who's young enough to be your second wife. And I cut off the sleeves of all your suits, not to mention your bollocks." "I'm not 30, Gina," I chuckled, although it wasn't really all that funny. "I'm 29. "For one more month?" she laughed. "It's your birthday soon," our boy said, laughing along with his mother, although he didn't have a clue why, and tapping me on the back of the head with his sodding lightsaber. "Please don't do that, Pat," I said. He was back there with a week's shopping, muttering under his breath, pretending to be in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon with Harrison Ford. "I've lost my starboard engine," he jabbered away to himself. "Fire when ready." I turned to look at him. He was 4 years old, with dirty blonde hair that hung down over eyes that were the same shade of blue as his mother's, Tiffany blue. Catching my eye, he grinned at me with pure childish delight. "Happy birthday, dear Daddy," he sang. "Happy birthday, birthday." To Pat, my birthday was a chance to finally give me the homemade card he had hidden under his bed. To me, it meant that the best might already be over. When would I feel the way I felt the night my wife said that she would marry me? When would I feel the way I felt the morning my son was born? When would life be that, I don't know, real again? When? "When did you become interested in cars?" Gina asked. "I bet you don't even know what kind of petrol this one uses, do you?" Fucking hell. "The green kind," I said, taking a wild guess. "You know, non-leaded. The one that saves a rainforest every time you fill her up." "It's diesel, you donut," she laughed. "I never knew a man less interested in cars than you. What happened?" What could I tell her? You don't tell a wife that some inanimate object somehow represents all those things you know you're never going to have, the places you are never going to see, the women you're never going to love, the things you're never going to do. You can't tell a wife all that stuff. Not even a wife you love very much. Especially not a wife like that. "It only carries one passenger," she said. "One thin female passenger." "You're still thin and female," I said. "What's brought all this on, Harry? Come on, tell me." "Maybe I'm compensating for becoming an old git," I said. "I want to recapture my glorious youth. Isn't that what men do?" "You're turning 30, she said. "We're going to open a couple of bottles and have a nice cake with candles." "And balloons," Pat said. "And balloons," Gina said. She shook her lovely head. "We're not having you put down, Harry." Gina was a couple of months older than me. She had breezed through her 30th birthday surrounded by friends and family, dancing with her son to Wham's greatest hits. She looked great that night. But clearly my own birthday was going to be a bit more traumatic. "You don't regret anything, do you?" she said. "Like what?" "You know," she said, suddenly deadly serious. "Like us." We had married young. Gina was 3 months pregnant with Pat on our wedding day, and it was, by some distance, the happiest day of my life. But nothing was ever really the same again, because after that there was no disguising the fact that we were grown-ups. While our friends were dancing the night away in clubs, we were up all hours with our baby's teething problems. While they were worrying about meeting the right person, we were worrying about meeting the payments on our first real home. I didn't regret any of it. I loved my wife and I loved our son. Life without them was unimaginable. But lately I found myself wondering when I'd stopped being young. "The force is strong in this one," Pat said. "A red sports car," Gina said to herself. "And you don't even like driving." "Happy birthday to you," Pat sang, smacking me across the ear with his lightsaber. "Squash tomatoes and glue. You look like a monkey, and you act like one too." "That's not nice," I told him, as the traffic ground to a halt, and my ear began to throb. Gina told me to buy the MGF, and to stop thinking that my life was over just because I was turning 30. She told me I was being pathetic, but she laughed when she said it and put her arm around me. At any other time during the 7 years we had been together, we wouldn't have been able to afford a good second car. But my job was going well. I was the producer of the Marty Mann Show, a late-night talk show that went out every Saturday on terrestrial television. For the 6 years before that, I'd been the producer of the Marty Mann Show when it was on local radio, and most of the country had not even heard the first rumours about his mad bastard presenter. But now, if you walked into a restaurant with him, everybody stopped eating and talking just so they could look at him. Girls who a few years earlier wouldn't have touched him wearing surgical gloves now thought he was a love god. The critics, the ones who liked him, called Marty childlike, meaning he was open, frank and intuitive. They thought he asked the kind of questions other interviewers decided it was best not to even think about. And it was true. The editing process that exists in most of us seemed to be completely missing from Marty's brain. And he got answers, even when what he really deserved was a punch in the mouth. The critics who didn't like Marty also called him childlike, meaning he was selfish, immature and cruel. But Marty wasn't really childlike at all. He was just undeveloped. We had met at a local radio station where the staff were either on their way up or on their way out. It was a grotty little building full of curdled ambition and stale cigarette smoke, but I always sort of missed the place, because that was where I met Gina. When the first Japanese bank started to go bust, the person we booked to talk about what it all meant was not an economist or a financial journalist, but the professor who taught Japanese at the college across the street. Okay, so he was a language teacher, but he was the best we could get, except his appendix burst on the morning he was due to come in, and coming off the bench as a substitute we got his star pupil, Gina. Tall, radiant Gina was fluent in Japanese, apparently an expert on the culture, and she had legs that went on for weeks. She was beautiful, charming, intelligent, way, way out of my league. And then, when the red light came on in the studio, Gina became paralyzed with nerves. She couldn't speak. When I had first seen her, I thought she was unapproachable, but as I watched her stuttering her way through her incoherent tale of economic decline, she was suddenly human, and I knew I had a chance. I also knew exactly how she felt. The red light always did that to me too. I was never comfortable in front of a microphone or a camera. So, when it was over, it was not difficult for me to commiserate with her, and she took me for sushi. She had been in love with Japanese culture ever since she was a little girl. She had actually lived there during her year out between sixth form and college, teaching English in Kyoto. The happiest year of my life, and she was planning to go back. There was a job offer from an American bank in Tokyo. Nothing was going to stop her. I prayed that I would. We met for a drink, and she brought a book called Snow Country. I read it as soon as I got home. A jaded playboy falls in love with a doomed geisha in a mountain resort. It was actually pretty good. Dreaming of Gina's eyes, her legs, the way her whole face seemed to light up when she laughed. She cooked dinner at her flat. I had to take my shoes off before I came in. We discussed Japanese culture, or rather Gina talked, and I listened, dropping bits of chicken teriyaki on the carpet with my chopsticks, until it was time to call a cab or brush my teeth. And then we were making love on the floor, or the futon, as Gina called it, and I wanted her to stay with me forever. So I promised her everything. Happiness, endless love, and, crucially, a family. I knew the family thing would get her. Her dad had buggered off when Gina was 4 years old, and she'd grown up pining for the security of family life. But she still cried when she told the bank that she wouldn't be going to Tokyo after all. I knew she had given up a lot to be with me. If I hadn't been so deliriously happy, I might even have felt a bit guilty. After we were married and Pat was born, she stayed home. She said she didn't mind giving up work for Pat and me. My two boys, she called us. I don't want my son brought up by strangers, she said, while I'm in an office. I don't want to come home from work too tired to play with him. I don't want him growing up without me. I don't want his childhood to be like mine. We can get by with less.